Hello friends. You are welcome to our literary channel Academic Domain. Today we will discuss the life and works of Emily Bronte. If you haven't subscribed the channel yet, please subscribe it and hit the bell icon to get notifications of upcoming videos. Kindly like, share and give your valuable suggestions through comments. Now let's discuss the life and works of Emily Bronte. Emily Jane Bronte was an English novelist and poet who is best known for her only novel, Wuthering Heights, now considered a classic of English literature. She also published a book of poetry with her sisters Charlotte and Anne titled Poems by Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, with her own poems finding regard as poetic genius. Emily was the second youngest of the four surviving Bronte siblings, between the youngest Anne and her brother Branwell. She published under the pen name Ellis Bell. Emily Bronte was born on the 30th of July 1818 to Maria Branwell and an Irish father, Patrick Bronte. The family was living on Market Street, in a house now known as the Bronte birthplace in the village of Thornton on the outskirts of Bradford, in the West Riding of Yorkshire, England. Emily was the second youngest of 6 siblings, preceded by Maria, Elizabeth, Charlotte and Branwell. In 1820, Emily's younger sister Anne, the last Bronte child, was born. Shortly thereafter, the family moved 8 miles away to Haworth, where Patrick was employed as perpetual curate. In Haworth, the children would have opportunities to develop their literary talents. When Emily was only 3, and all 6 children under the age of 8, she and her siblings lost their mother, Maria, to cancer on the 15th of September 1821. The younger children were to be cared for by Elizabeth Branwell, their aunt and Maria's sister. Emily's 3 elder sisters, Maria, Elizabeth, and Charlotte, were sent to the clergy daughters' school at Cowan Bridge. At the age of 6, on the 25th of November 1824, Emily joined her sisters at school for a brief period. At school, however, the children suffered abuse and privations, and when a typhoid epidemic swept the school, Maria and Elizabeth became ill. Maria, who may actually have had tuberculosis, was sent home, where she died. Elizabeth died shortly after. The 4 youngest Bronte children, all under 10 years of age, had suffered the loss of the 3 eldest women in their immediate family. Charlotte maintained that the school's poor conditions permanently affected her health and physical development, and that it had hastened the deaths of Maria, born 1814, and Elizabeth, born 1815, who both died in 1825. After the deaths of his older daughters, Patrick removed Charlotte and Emily from the school. Charlotte would use her experiences and knowledge of the school as the basis for Lowood School in Jane Eyre. The 3 remaining sisters and their brother Branwell were thereafter educated at home by their father and aunt Elizabeth Branwell. A shy girl, Emily was very close to her siblings and was known as a great animal lover, especially for befriending stray dogs she found wandering around the countryside. Despite the lack of formal education, Emily and her siblings had access to a wide range of published material. Favorites included Sir Walter Scott, Byron, Shelley, and Blackwood's Magazine. Inspired by a box of toy soldiers Branwell had received as a gift, the children began to write stories, which they set in a number of invented imaginary worlds populated by their soldiers as well as their heroes, the Duke of Wellington and his sons, Charles and Arthur Wellesley. Little of Emily's work from this period survives, except for poems spoken by characters. Initially, all 4 children shared in creating stories about a world called Angria. However, when Emily was 13, she and Anne withdrew from participation in the Angria story and began a new one about Gondal, a fictional island whose myths and legends were to preoccupy the 2 sisters throughout their lives. With the exception of the Gondal poems and Anne's lists of Gondal's characters and placer names, Emily and Anne's Gondal writings were largely not preserved. Among those that did survive are some diary papers, written by Emily in her 20s, which describe current events in Gondal. The heroes of Gondal tended to resemble the popular image of the Scottish Highlander, a sort of British version of the noble savage, romantic outlaws capable of more nobility, passion, and bravery than the denizens of civilization. Similar themes of romanticism and noble savagery are apparent across the Brontes' juvenilia, notably in Branwell's The Life of Alexander Percy, which tells the story of an all-consuming, death-defying, and ultimately self-destructive love and is generally considered an inspiration for Wuthering Heights. At 17, Emily began to attend the Roe Head Girls' School, where Charlotte was a teacher, but suffered from extreme homesickness, according to Charlotte, and left after only a few months. Charlotte wrote later that, "Liberty was the breath of Emily's nostrils. Without it, she perished." The change from her own home to a school and from her own very noiseless, very secluded but unrestricted and unartificial mode of life, to one of disciplined routine, though under the kindest auspices, was what she failed in enduring. "I felt in my heart she would die if she did not go home," and with this conviction obtained her recall. Emily returned home and Anne took her place. At this time, the girls' objective was to obtain sufficient education to open a small school of their own. Emily became a teacher at Law Hill School in Halifax beginning in September 1838, when she was 20. Her health soon broke under the stress of the 17-hour workday, and she returned home in April 1839. Thereafter she remained at home, helping the family's servant with the cooking, ironing, and cleaning at Haworth. She taught herself German from books and also practiced the piano. Emily was an accomplished pianist. In 1842, Emily accompanied Charlotte to the Ege pensionate in Brussels, Belgium, where they attended the girls' academy run by Constantin Ege in the hope of perfecting their French and German before opening their own school. Unlike Charlotte, Emily was uncomfortable in Brussels and refused to adopt Belgian fashions, saying, "I wish to be as God made me," which rendered her something of an outcast. 9 of Emily's French essays survive from this period. Ege seems to have been impressed with the strength of Emily's character, writing that the two sisters were committed to their studies and by the end of the term had become so competent in French that Madame Ege proposed that they both stay another half-year, even, according to Charlotte, offering to dismiss the English master so that she could take his place. Emily had, by this time, become a competent pianist and teacher, and it was suggested that she might stay on to teach music. However, the illness and death of their aunt, Elizabeth Branwell, necessitated their return to Haworth. In 1844, the sisters attempted to open a school in their house, but their plans were stymied by an inability to attract students to the remote area. In 1844, Emily began going through all the poems she had written, recopying them neatly into 2 notebooks. One was labeled, Gondel Poems, the other was unlabeled. In the autumn of 1845, Charlotte discovered the notebooks and insisted that the poems be published. Emily, understandably furious at the invasion of her privacy, at first refused but, according to Charlotte, relented when Anne brought out her manuscripts and revealed to Charlotte that she had been writing poems in secret as well. Around this time Emily wrote one of her most famous poems, No Coward Soul Is Mine. Some literary critics have speculated that it is a poem about Anne Bronte, while others see it as an answer to the violation of her privacy and her own transformation into a published writer. Despite Charlotte's later claim that it was Emily's final poem, this is factually inaccurate. In 1846, the sisters' poems were published in one volume as poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. Charlotte later stated that the Bronte sisters had adopted pseudonyms for publication, preserving their initials. Charlotte was Currer Bell, Emily was Ellis Bell, and Anne was Acton Bell. Charlotte wrote in the biographical notice of Ellis and Acton Bell that the ambiguous choice was dictated by a sort of conscientious scruple at assuming Christian names positively masculine, while we did not like to declare ourselves women, because we had a vague impression that authoresses are liable to be looked on with prejudice. Charlotte contributed 19 poems, and Emily and Anne each contributed 21. Although the sisters were told several months after publication that only 2 copies had sold, they were not discouraged. Of their 2 readers, one was impressed enough to request their autographs. The Athenaeum reviewer praised Ellis Bell's work for its music and power, singling out those poems as the best in the book. He wrote, quote, "Ellis possesses a fine, quaint spirit and an evident power of wing that may reach heights not here attempted, and the critic reviewer recognized the presence of more genius than it was supposed this utilitarian age had devoted to the loftier exercises of the intellect." Unquote. Emily Bronte's solitary nature has made her a mysterious figure and a challenge for biographers to assess. Except for Ellen Nussey and Louise de Bassompierre, Emily's fellow student in Brussels, she does not seem to have made any friends outside her family. Her closest friend was her sister Anne. Together they shared their own fantasy world, Gondel, and, according to Ellen Nussey, in childhood they were, like twins, inseparable companions, and, in the very closest sympathy which never had any interruption. Emily was a great nature lover, and over the years, her love of nature has been the subject of many anecdotes. A newspaper dated the 31st of December 1899, gives the folksy account that, with bird and beast, Emily had the most intimate relations, and from her walks she often came with fledgling or young rabbit in hand, talking softly to it, quite sure, too, that it understood. Emily Bronte has often been characterized as a devout if somewhat unorthodox Christian, a heretic and a visionary, mystic of the moors. About Wuthering Heights. Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights was first published in London in 1847 by Thomas Courtly Newby, appearing as the first 2 volumes of a 3-volume set that included Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey. The authors were printed as being Ellis and Acton Bell. Emily's real name did not appear until 1850, when it was printed on the title page of an edited commercial edition. The novel's innovative structure somewhat puzzled critics. Wuthering Heights' violence and passion led the Victorian public and many early reviewers to think that it had been written by a man. According to Juliet Gardiner, the vivid sexual passion and power of its language and imagery impressed, bewildered and appalled reviewers. Even though the novel received mixed reviews when it first came out, and was often condemned for its portrayal of amoral passion, the book subsequently became an English literary classic. Emily Bronte never knew the extent of fame she achieved with her only novel, as she died a year after its publication, aged 30. Although a letter from her publisher indicates that Emily had begun to write a second novel, the manuscript has never been found. Perhaps Emily or a member of her family eventually destroyed the manuscript, if it existed, when she was prevented by illness from completing it. Death. Emily's health was probably weakened by the harsh local climate and by unsanitary conditions at home, where water was contaminated by runoff from the church's graveyard. Branwell died suddenly, on Sunday the 24th of September 1848. At his funeral service, a week later, Emily caught a severe cold that quickly developed into inflammation of the lungs and led to tuberculosis. Though her condition worsened steadily, she rejected medical help and all offered remedies, saying that she would have no poisoning doctor near her. On the morning of the 19th of December 1848, Charlotte, fearing for her sister, wrote. At noon, Emily was worse. She could only whisper in gasps. With her last audible words, she said to Charlotte, "If you will send for a doctor, I will see him now," but it was too late. She died that same day at about 2 in the afternoon. According to Mary Robinson, an early biographer of Emily, it happened while she was sitting on the sofa. It was less than 3 months after Branwell's death, which led Martha Brown, a housemaid, to declare that Miss Emily died of a broken heart for love of her brother. Emily had grown so thin that her coffin measured only 16 inches, 40 centimeters, wide. The carpenter said he had never made a narrower one for an adult. Her remains were interred in the family vault in St. Michael and All Angels Church, Haworth. Literary contribution of Emily Bronte. In her short span of life, Emily Bronte could write only 2 books. One is titled as Poems, co-authored with her 2 sisters Anne Bronte and Charlotte Bronte, and second one is Wuthering Heights, a Bildungsroman novel as a sole author. Thanks for watching the video.